So it was constantly like getting a diagnosis and telling someone, and they're like, no, you don't have it. Of course you don't have it. And because I trust my loved ones and friends more than kind of a doctor, it was a repeated cycle of getting undiagnosed. And so a big thing I tell people is like undiagnosing, like telling someone they don't have a diagnosis, is also diagnosing.
Welcome to Season 2 of ADHD Difference. I'm your host, Julie Egg, ADHD advocate, author of The Missing Piece, a woman's guide to understanding, diagnosing and living with ADHD, and an unapologetic doer of many things. This season, we're turning up the volume with a global lineup of brilliant guests, bringing their lived experiences, insights, research, strategies and resources. And of course, along with a healthy dose of humour and humility. Whether you're neurodivergent yourself or just curious, there's something here for every curious brain. Let's dive in. Today, I'm joined by Hufsa Ahmad, a licensed clinical social worker, scientist and award-winning mental health advocate. Hufsa is known for her rare ability to blend science, clinical experience and stand-up comedy to help people reframe their struggles as pathways to resilience. But beyond her personal expertise, it's Hufsa's personal story that makes this conversation so important. She has lived experience with ADHD, bipolar disorder, addiction, and years of misdiagnosis, including being diagnosed and undiagnosed with ADHD 4 different times because her presentation didn't fit outdated stereotypes. Hufsa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Julie, thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome. You've spoken about being diagnosed and then undiagnosed with ADHD 4 different times because your presentation didn't match what people expected. Can you please take us back to that journey?
Yeah, I think the main problem, or I suppose not a problem, is that I could study. That I was like internally motivated by learning. I loved reading. I started reading when I was 2, and I was lucky to have adults constantly. I had a very huge Pakistani family, they're fostering me like my interest in reading and things like that. So everyone thinks, oh, if you have ADHD, you struggle in school. And my struggles in school were more behavioral. Like, I remember getting kicked out of class. I don't even remember why. But in 8th grade, I remember just feeling awful because I got kicked out. And then there were students outside that were like pointing at me and laughing and making fun of me and like making a Pakistani-ish Indian accent or something. I don't really remember. I don't know why I got kicked out. I know I got a lot of detentions in high school. I was late. I talked a lot. I would blurt out things, and it was really not really ill-intentioned, and it was very much internalized, like, why can't you be here on time? And it's something that like I couldn't really answer. And the undiagnosis came because I finally got the diagnosis in junior year of college. I went to Harvey Mudd, which is a very good engineering college. And like back then, like 20-ish years ago, if you had ADHD and you took Adderall, you were considered a cheater. So I didn't want to tell anyone. And then when I told my mom, she's like, you don't have ADHD, you struggle, you're fine in school. So it was constantly like getting a diagnosis and telling someone, and they're like, no, you don't have it. Of course you don't have it. And because I trust my loved ones and friends more than kind of a doctor, it was a repeated cycle of getting undiagnosed. And so a big thing I tell people is like undiagnosing, like telling someone they don't have a diagnosis, is also diagnosing. That like we get annoyed, like, why does everyone think they have ADHD? You don't have it. Congratulations. Your criticism is that we shouldn't diagnose ourselves, yet you have also presented a diagnosis. So yeah, I think the 5th doctor, it was sort of like, all right, I have ADHD, I can work, that's fine. But like the hyperactivity, the blurting out is still a huge problem. Yeah. I mean, not too much of a problem. Like, don't not hire me, but it's definitely there. I mean to say.
A along with that, with the bipolar angle, so you were diagnosed with bipolar as well?
That came first, yeah. It's an interesting thing because it was like the problem with having a comorbidity, right? Two co-occurring disorders is that there's not much research on ADHD and bipolar. There are certain studies, but it's also very hard to do those studies because where do you get people with both? Like, how do you verify? A lot of bipolar studies are done in psychiatric units because it makes the most sense in the most controlled environment. And when you have these two things, it's like, yes, ADHD symptoms and then bipolar symptoms, but then there's going to be symptoms that occur when those two are mixed, and those aren't well understood. I think also what I feel sad about is that upon getting undiagnosed, my hyperactivity or like impulsivity, which is a huge like thing that I've struggled with, is like, oh, you're manic, you're hypomanic. Let's increase your bipolar medication. So it's like I kept being told I have mixed episodes. Like, I'm so depressed and hopeless, yet I'm impulsive and have this energy. Oh, it must be a mixed episode. When really it is more ADHD hyperactivity. It's always there. It's not just when mania, but that's what happens whenever you're not diagnosed properly or there's not much research about it.
No, that's very, very interesting. So what would you like clinicians, families, or even people with lived experience, what would you like them to be to understand about this co-occurring condition?
Yeah, I would say leave it to the kind of doctors and the person. Like, don't make the judgments for them. Like, oh, you're manic or you're ADHD unless you're a trained professional and it's your patient. It is unethical to diagnose someone who you're not. And if you are a random person on the street, I don't think you should be assigning the labels. But I think having a little bit more compassion, that it's also because it's not well understood, and I imagine my bipolar ADHD is so much different than someone else's, like a little bit of compassion that I am trying my best. And if I blurt something out or it doesn't make sense, it's like, for example, this recently happened, I think 1 or 2 nights ago, is that, I'm up late, I'm energetic, perhaps a little hypomanic, like hyper-focused ADHD, I don't know, but I got it in my head that I needed to send a message tonight. And in my opinion, I thought it was like fine. So I was like, okay, ChatGPT, give me a draft. And I was like, ChatGPT, this is so mean. And I edited it. I spent like 20, 30 minutes and I sent it. And to me, it was fine. I wake up in the morning, this person is furious at me. So I was like, I'm going to be direct with you. Gets very mad at me, proceeds to block me and remove me from many communities that I was part of. And it was hard because I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to say it that way. And at the time, it made sense. And it's like not an isolated thing that people get mad at me from what I say. And even though I have good intentions, that like, I know it's hard to tell someone like be empathetic when they're upset. But I think both people, like me, I must take accountability and correct things. But I think I appreciate the opportunity and a little bit of benefit of the doubt. Yeah.
And I think, Hufsa, the more that we can openly talk about comorbidities, and the presentations are very different, as you said, different for everybody. And so we can't be put in a box and say, well, you don't do this, so therefore this. That's very, very different. So thank you. The more we can talk about it, I think the more alive the conversation is, and the more people know and understand and get that not everyone is different. I also would like to talk to you about high achievers, because you said something really powerful. You said, we matter too, even if we can do homework. Why are high achievers with ADHD so often dismissed or misdiagnosed? And what are the consequences of that?
So have you heard of Healthy Gamer GG? He goes by Dr. K. He's on YouTube. Tell me. He's like a psychiatrist and Twitch streamer, and he talks a lot about ADHD. And I saw this video, I think 2 years ago, that just resonated, where he said a lot of people with ADHD are so smart that like we're kind of zoning out and the teacher calls on us, but we're so smart we blurt out the right answer that like we really are able to survive just by our intelligence. And then what I've noticed and seen is that once we get into adulthood and we don't have the structure of classes and college and like meals and stuff, that's where we start falling apart because we needed that structure to hold us together. And like, I mean, it's very, very hard. I'm a speaker, therapist, consultant, all independent work, like doing it without structure was much harder than I thought. And so it's kind of like, I don't know what to call it, kind of like coping or like maybe masking, but we just kind of like make it seem like we're fine and we can do it until there's a point where we can't do it anymore. And I think it's one thing, like I really also feel like, oh, you are a high achiever, then your ADHD doesn't matter, right? And like, I stopped taking ADHD medicine like a couple of years ago because it's like, all right, like, I'm not going to say being a therapist is harder than an engineering college. Like, I think I'm fine. But there are things like the impulsivity and like the mistakes that I make and the trouble organizing myself are still there. But there's not really much empathy or like consideration because it's like, well, there are people who can't graduate from high school with ADHD. And I think all of those viewpoints are valid. Like, I can't say like, oh, I'm not that bad, therefore I don't need it. It's more like we're just different. And like, I think it hurts a lot when I try to explain to someone like, I am sorry, like I did this, I aim to do this, I have a disability called ADHD. And people look at me like, are you just making excuses? Because it's like, it's too hard to understand that someone who can like read and write and do work also has a disability.
The results may be very academic and all this achievement, but what goes hidden, I think, is the hours and hours and hours extra work and, extra effort to achieve those.
Exactly.
Even though our intelligence may be up there already, and that's great, we can't just wing life. There's also a lot of hard work. And so whatever it is that distracts us, we've got to go back on track. And it is a bit tough. And it's been said so often to many women also diagnosed as adults. Yeah. You can't possibly have ADHD because you've got a PhD or you're, whatever it is. You're a CEO of a company. Very interesting.
Well, yeah, I like that term. That was the one I was searching for. And like, yeah, I think, oh gosh, I was going to say something and I forgot, which I think is ironic because I'm on an ADHD podcast. I was like, I have a great point and I forgot it. So I'll try to interrupt you if I remember.
Hold that thought and we can come back to that. You work with many high-performing adults yourself who feel that they're constantly getting away with something. We talk about imposter syndrome. So why does imposter syndrome hit neurodivergent high achievers so hard? And how do you think they can begin to reclaim the confidence that actually fits who they are?
Yeah, so I recently read a study about how people with like chronic PTSD like have very little self-compassion. And one thing that I try to speak on that I don't hear too much about is that having mental illness or neurodivergence or a disability is inherently traumatizing. Because what happens is that we have these behaviors and we don't know what it's from. And so we internalize it. Like, why can't I stop being late? Which is treatable. It is a challenge. But like, why can't I stop blurting things out? Why can't I stop saying things? And to give you an idea, like me saying things incorrectly has led to disciplinary action, getting terminated. I even had to take an extra year in grad school because I piss people off when I don't even mean to. And so it's like something I literally spent hours like just thinking about interactions, trying to predict, but every situation is so different. So like the reason that we kind of interpret this and internalize it is because we don't know what's going on. And we see the reactions other people have towards us. We get the stigma. I think another thing is like, saying, sorry, I have ADHD. I don't think that's the best way to go about it because we shouldn't apologize for having a disorder. We should acknowledge what we've done and improve upon it. But a lot of things are happening now where it's like, oh, everyone has ADHD. You're making an excuse. And I think for people that are not making an excuse, I'm trying to explain, I didn't mean to, like, I have a condition and I'm trying, this is what I'm going to do. I don't do it again. Like, when people dismiss that way or don't believe you, like, that stigma from them becomes self-stigma. It becomes our stigma. And I think also, like, the fact that there's not much awareness in the past couple of years, ADHD, we understand it differs by culture, by like gender, by so many different things. But we didn't know that before, so we didn't really have an answer. So I think that's where like we lack the self-compassion, one, because we don't have the understanding of it. Two, we've definitely had bad stigmatizing reactions. And three, it's just, I think we're just so hard on ourselves because like we want to do things, but we can't do everything we want to do because we have a disability.
And, even the word disability or ADHD and disability, whether they're in the same box or not, differs from country to country. In New Zealand, it's not considered a disability. The other thing, too, with the imposter syndrome, as you were talking before, about not quite understanding why things may have been blurted out or why this happened or why that happened. Solely a diagnosis doesn't explain everything. I always say your journey begins once you have the diagnosis because there's so much, isn't there, to unravel and to not just be told X, Y, Z, but to really believe it and let that resonate and have some self-exploration, I guess. How can I do that again without going through the hassle or the repercussions?
I think one thing I see a lot in the people I work with is like, is it the ADHD or is it me? For example, it's like I was very bad at flowing through my emails. Like I would star them and I would literally never come back. So it's like, okay, was that ADHD or was that me not really taking the initiative to set a reminder or like do that? Because honestly, I didn't want to check those emails and I was procrastinating. So one suggestion I give, and like you would probably know better than me and your listeners would probably know, but one thing I'm trying to figure out is like, okay, is it part of like a condition that if I set up like a standard, like, okay, I'm going to do this and I like use the executive hacks or whatever to do it and it still can't be done. There's still a barrier that's beyond my control. That's when I think it might be more ADHD. And also I remembered what I wanted to tell you that you talked about earlier. Can I say it now?
Yes.
Okay. So the amount of preparation. So, I mean, because I stopped ADHD medicine like years ago, I think a year and a half. And then now this year, as of like May, I just fully became me, my business, me, myself, and I. That it took me several months to realize, oh my God, I don't have this all together because my mind is being pulled in different directions because I don't have that structure, which is like, I'm realizing, oh my God, this is much harder than I thought. So like literally I've been setting up systems, trying to figure it out where I got like a in-person, like a, what do you call it, a hardcover planner, like a real life planner. And I had over 100 Google tasks and I sat there for hours, like organizing things, putting in lists and like putting in the planner and stuff that like to get my life together, I have to spend so much time planning. And it's like putting it in the calendar and everything gets it done. But it's so embarrassing because it's like, oh, if I don't do that, then it's just like, I have to put in so much work to like get work done. And it's like, no one really understands that. And it's like, yeah, it's hard.
Well, I'd say, please don't be embarrassed with any strategy that works for you because our brains are so different. And even the neurodivergent brains are very different, even within that kind of category, if you want to call it that, or that variation. You were talking about ADHD. Is it ADHD or is it me? And I think with strategies, there's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. And I think keep going, keep tweaking it, and keep making it your own, and own it, and invest in the outcome. So you're going to take a bit of time, and there might be post-it notes and pens and everything flying around, but you know at the end of it, it will work for you. You keep at it. Keep at it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It feels like I'm re-stigmatizing myself. Like, it's like, oh yeah, I have ADHD. I can handle it. I used to say that, like, whatever, I know how to handle it. And I realized in the past, like, maybe month, I was like, oh my God, this is much harder. And so, like, yeah, it's kind of like, it feels like I'm getting diagnosed for the first time again, because it's like, oh yeah, there's so much that I still need to work on. And I really don't want to do the medicine because of its stimulants. For me personally, not saying everyone, the stimulants will trigger my bipolar symptoms, and then the non-stimulants make me very sleepy. So I've just been trying to figure out to the best of my ability, like without doing medication, because that's another thing about having bipolar. And ADHD is like you're already on so many medications in my case that it's a lot.
Perhaps being diagnosed and then undiagnosed, diagnosed, undiagnosed. You have suggested you've got doubts whether it's me or whether I don't blame you, because that's a massive roller coaster to go through, being told one thing and getting your head around that and then saying no, yes, no. So self-doubt creeping in is so understandable in your situation. So don't give yourself a hard time.
Thank you. I needed this. This was my little personally therapy session. Thank you, Julie.
You are so welcome. Now, your work sits at a very sort of fascinating intersection of science and storytelling, comedy, and mental health. So I'd love to know what's exciting you right now about your work. Is there a project or an idea or something that feels alive and kicking for you at the moment?
Oh gosh. So I'm working on my book. It's called Same Shiite, Different Day, a little alluding to my Muslim comedy background. And it's very multifaceted in that I decided, because for so long I've been like, what do I want to write about? I have so many things. I was like, I'm going to write this book as if it's my ADHD brain. Like chapter 1 is going to be on this, and then chapter 2 is probably going to be on something different, but it's going to be walking people through my brain and how I think, because I have too many interests and specializations, which isn't a bad thing, but rather than try to fit into this mold of like, oh, this is a standard book, it's like, this is me and my book. I will talk about mental illness, mental health conditions. I'll talk about stigma. I'll talk about what it's like growing up with perfectionistic parents. I'll talk about, engineer to therapist. I'll talk about, I don't know, some jokes, It's just going to be like an exploration. And the reason that I like Same Shiite, Different Day, besides it being a pun, is that one thing is that, life doesn't actually get better. Like, it's sort of like in my life, I've always been like, once I get my master's, it's going to get better. Once I get my license, once I start my private practice. And it's like, nah, you're still going to struggle. It's the same struggle. It's a different day. And because I think our society feels, at least in America, we feel an aversion to struggle. We think something's wrong with us. That I feel like if I can communicate, struggle is inevitable. And if it's going to happen, you might as well learn from it. And it sucks. It will always suck. It's been so painful. And we just have to keep going because struggle will bring strength. And it's been very emotional because I've had a lot of unlucky things happen. Like my therapy cat died before he was 2. And then I faced such online harassment where people made memes of my dead cat, and it was very brutal. I've suffered a lot of stigma and discrimination. But I still consider myself a very lucky person. I have my current little kitty cat who's got a form of epilepsy no vet has ever seen. That's how unlucky, quote unquote, I have. But she's so fluffy and cute, and she takes care of me. And I have friends and family. I'm here talking to you today, Julie. So despite the objective unlucky things, same Shiite, different day, that's okay. It's just going to happen, and I'm happy. So my goal is by January 1st of 2027, it's out there and published. And I'm sure I could get a publisher, or I could self-publish. There's a way.
And I wish you very, very well on that journey. Very exciting one. Mm-hmm. With ADHD and bipolar existing side by side in your life, What's a strategy, ritual, or a mindset that helps you stay grounded or organized on a daily basis?
Self-regulation is very important. Like, I was definitely the type of person like, oh, I'm upset, let me call a friend. But the older you get, your friends get busy, they have kids, like, it's not so easy to rely on people. And also, it does run the risk of people getting burnt out, which is not a reflection of you. It's not a reflection of them. Some people don't have endless wells of empathy, and even therapists get burnt out. So if therapists get burnt out, yeah, your boyfriend might get burnt out, type of a thing. So self-regulation, if I'm upset, I have this app. It's called Balance. I'm not sponsored by them. I'd like to be, but so Balance, if you hear this, sponsor me, please give me promo code. But like, it's just been the only meditation like app. You know, I've tried so many, I don't want to list them, but like the one that's like consistent voice. There's no weird music. There's no, hi, how are you today? You know, like that weird stuff you find on YouTube. And it has 10-day plans of like 10 days to plan to sleep, 10-day plan to like work stress, 10-day plan for meditation, that it's become like a go-to thing every night. I use it for meditating. If I'm upset, I'll put it on. It has a 5-minute like version for me to regulate. And biking is another thing, like exercise I've always enjoyed. I can just go do that whenever I'm upset. So I would say, yeah, meditation and biking.
Great. So that's emotional and physical well-being all rolled into that. Well done.
Oh, I have one more thing, if that's okay. I lived on Twitter. That's all I did all day. I would think about what I was going to post or what I saw and stuff. But what ended up happening is that over a year ago, last September, I was on Twitter and my boyfriend, and we recently started dating. He's like, what are you doing? Are you on Twitter? And I was like, I will not confirm or deny that. And then he hands me a package, like a gift. I open it, it's a book. And he said, when you feel like going on Twitter, read this because that thing is ruining your mind. So what ended up happening is that I quit all social media for about a year. And instead, I tried to read, and I could read maybe a page at a time. Like, it was so hard to do it, but like now, like I can read for longer. I can finish a book in 3 days. Like it'll tell you it takes like 7 hours to finish a book. It's like, okay, well, I was on social media 7 hours, so I could just break it up over a week. And my mind worked again. I became more creative. I could focus better. I was happier. That like, I didn't realize that like just the act of practicing focusing is really like enough. And like to stop doing something bad for you, if you can't start doing something good, stop doing something bad. It really transformed everything. And that's like, I highly recommend anyone with ADHD, don't be on that stuff all day. It's not helping your attention span at all.
For someone who is listening, who has ADHD plus another diagnosis, or is still wondering whether the pieces of their story make sense, what would you most want them to hear?
So I think one therapist I met who's getting a specialized in ADHD said people with ADHD very often have another thing. Like it's very rare to only have ADHD. So I think one thing is like that's helpful is to not overanalyze and figure out what is the disorder, what is this, like do I have this, do I have this? That sometimes just accepting you have it and seeing how you can deal with it is a very good solution, because if you sit there and try to figure out like, is this a bipolar, or this is ADHD, or is it my anxiety, like I do, like I will lose my mind. Like I will not be able to really just deal with the problem, because at the end of the day, why you have the problem is helpful if it helps to know why. But if you can't know why and it doesn't help, then it just detracts from you being able to do what you need to do. So I always think like be solution oriented, and also like, I mean, diagnoses, the DSM, I don't know if that's, do you guys follow the DSM in New Zealand?
Yes.
I'm very sure that the ADHD diagnostic criteria will change. Keep in mind, people don't fit in boxes, and a diagnosis can be helpful, but it doesn't know everything.
The DSM was only in recent versions, and I know they come out relatively often. It's only relatively recently that they agreed or had written down that ADHD and autism, that you could in fact have both as a comorbidity. Prior to that time, they were very separate, so you had to choose: is it this one or is it this one? And of course, you had all the other neurodiversities in there too, including bipolar, and it's just a big soup of differences.
Yeah.
Hufsa, it's been a joy chatting with you today. I really appreciate your honesty and insight and your humour too when it comes to looking at ADHD and bipolar and sharing your lived experience with us and the listeners. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I think one thing I'll end on, if that's okay, is that as a scientist, we're always trying to prove ourselves wrong. It's sort of like, hey, I did this study. Like, I created a molecule, right, that never existed. And then they're like, okay, do it again. So it's like, we in science, like the Schrodinger's cat principle is like, nothing is certain, right? And I feel like with psychology and sometimes like that kind of stuff, it's more like, oh, this is true and this is fact. When like 10, 15 years ago, there's no H in ADHD. They just called it ADD. So I think about having a level of healthy skepticism, that it's like, what we know now doesn't mean that it's correct, and it might be like disproved and proved again. And at the end of the day, it's just what's real and true and helpful to us, and what we can do is most important.